Very little written material survives from the 5th and 6th centuries in Britain. For a long time, this was taken as proof that these were illiterate, uneducated times. In actual fact, nothing could be further from the truth. Dark Age Britain was a time of intellectual as well as economic advance. A single sherd of Mediterranean pottery, identical to the Tintagel material, was recently found on the remote island of Caldy off the south coast of Wales. Caldy has been a holy island for hundreds of years. It still houses a monastery today. Jonathan Wooding showed me around.
It's the only piece we've found here, but where you find one, there's doubtless got to be more. Eastern ceramics, where they're turning up here, represent a period when the East is interested in the West. Is sending trade missions, diplomatic missions, whatever it may be, but Eastern people are turning up in Celtic Britain and they're expecting to find people who are essentially like them, descendants of Romans, who know the same languages, the same rituals, the same basic cultural ideas.
Caldy was part of the early monastic movement, which arrived in Britain with the pottery on boats from the Mediterranean.
Well, the monastic movement arrives at the same time as the departure of Roman rule. In the East, it was already playing a part in providing a new leadership almost, a new focus of leadership in a changing society, and I'm sure it was much the same here. People took it up with great enthusiasm as an alternative to the more settled or urban Christianity of the Roman world.
Dozens of monasteries sprung up in Britain in the Dark Age period, and they produced a new class of learned monk. There is one historical source for Dark Age Britain, written by a monk named Gildas in the 6th century, about 100 years after the departure of the Romans. It's an extraordinary, arousing account of this country's history. It was written in high-grade and rather flowery Latin. It was clearly intended for a sophisticated and literate audience, because it's peppered with classical references.
Gildas was the preeminent theologian of monasticism in his era. The great founder of Irish monasteries on the continent actually cites him as someone that the Pope ought to have read in writing to the Pope, not just any old Pope, but Gregory the Great, the most monastic Pope really of the first millennium. He is very much a figure who is known all over Western Europe. A world that can produce a Gildas is the learned world in close connection with a wider intellectual, a wider religious community. He certainly isn't just a unique figure. He's unique in perhaps our records, but that's tells you more about our records than it does about the time.
Gildas and men like him were not isolated monks hidden away from reality, but scholars in touch with the intellectual and religious ideas of their time.
We see a Britain that is in contact with the rest of the world. It's a normal process of contact. It's not just an Eastern missionary turning up in an odd place. I think we have to start thinking about it now as a sort of much more global thing. I think finds in places like Tintagel and Bantham are on a scale now that make it unlikely that there's just one or two ships. But more finds are turning up every year, and I think in time we will have a much clearer picture of the scale and the importance of these contacts. They're more or less contacts that escaped history. So that's an example of where archaeology has really told you something that you just simply didn't know before.
Literacy was not confined to the monastic elite in Dark Age Britain. Caldy Island had one more secret to give up in the form of an ancient stone inscribed in Latin.
With the sign of the cross, I ask from all those walking there that they pray for the soul from within of Cadogan.
This is rhythmic, syllabic, Adonic verse, and it is by centuries the oldest. these people are using the meters that become the standard fare of every subsequent European literature. It's not Dark Age. It is not illiterate.
Stones like the one in Caldy have been found scattered across Western Britain. These inscribed stones provide clear evidence for a highly literate society in Dark Age Britain. They are memorials, written not by kings or priests, but by ordinary people committing their thoughts to stone. For centuries, these inscriptions have been dismissed as the clumsy scrawling of a semi-literate society. In actual fact, they give us unique insight into the ideas that were structuring early British thought. The job of deciphering these ancient messages has been the work of David Howlett, editor of the Latin Medieval Dictionary in Oxford.
We're coming into the oldest part of the Bodleian Library, and what we see here is an embodiment in stone of the view of the universe that our ancestors had adopted from antiquity. 7 liberal arts, the human constructs of language, grammar, rhetoric, and logic, and the divine hard science, all of them mathematical. Arithmetic is static number, music is moving number, astronomy, geometry.
David believes that the structures which still shape learning today were first formulated in the Dark Ages. Was it some form of intellectual opposition that structured the way they thought?
It was a cooperation, a combination. You have the school of languages at the same door as the school of geometry and arithmetic. And over there, the school of astronomy in the same door as the school of rhetoric. It was a cooperation, a combination, the human arts with divine mathematical art. You need both. You cannot have one without the other. During the 6th century, modern Europe is invented, and it's invented here. Inside Britain, what we have is both this highly polished rhetorical latinity from Gildas 130 years after the departure of the legions, and these stone inscriptions. Now, the inscriptions have looked like ropey, odd Latin prose because they are, in fact, verse. Nobody read them aloud to see that they go tumpty, tumpty, tumpty. It's just there, you see it. And once you see it, it transforms your view of what you're reading, and it even more seriously transforms your view of the society from which this emerged.
Some of these stone inscriptions contain hidden layers of meaning.
And the inscription reads, Carausius hic jacet in hoc, congeries lapidum. Carausius here lies in this, a heap of stones. Straightforward. But if you read it backwards, it reads, lapides gericon hoc in jacet hic ius auscar, which is a faultless dactylic hexameter.
That's classical Latin.
This is classical Latin poetry, but read backwards. And if we return to the straightforward Carausius inscription and count at intervals of 7 letters, we find the name of the woman who designed this, which is Viola. Jorvert and Wallaun in sepulchres look in peace for the awesome advent of the judgment. A sanctissima mulier hic jacet, quae fuit amatissima conjux bivatisi. Audiva, a most holy woman, here lies, who was the most beloved wife of Bivatisus. In morals, discipline, and for wisdom than gold and precious stones, this woman was better. Now, she is the most holy, most beloved wife of a bishop.
You've said that there are thousands of these Dark Age inscriptions, that does rather imply that there were an awful lot of readers.
Some of these inscriptions are on hillsides in deepest Brycheiniog. They imply that there is a large class, large enough numbers to make this worthwhile. These islands are the focus for the real survival of Latin. If you imagine that at the time of the departure of the legions, the Brits are the only people in Europe who carry on writing very high-level literary Latin. And the reason this remained pure was that these were the only people in Europe who did not speak a Romance mother tongue. There was less linguistic interference from one to the other, so they learned Latin by the book, rather like Salman Rushdie learning English by the book and then writing very high-level literary language. And the Brits are the only people in Europe who do this.
Are we looking at a Renaissance here?
For a Renaissance to occur, you have to have a Dark Age. And I don't think the Dark Age ever existed. What I see is continuity in the intellectual life. The fall of Rome in 410, what caused the withdrawal of the legions from Britain, is a finite historical moment with great ramifications, and they're serious and catastrophic. And people have just supposed that that was what happened in Roman Britain, but it didn't. This is the only place that did not happen.
So, in other words, instead of turning the lights out, do you actually think that the lights were turned up brighter?
This is the only place in which the lights were turned up brighter.